Somebody wanted to know, by eating low carb the way I do and staying with that low spike diet, has it improved my insulin resistance at all, or am I just as insulin resistant as ever? Well, I'll be answering that question on today's edition of Beat Diabetes. All right, here is a person who says, may I ask you a question? The answer is, yeah, you can. I'm going to try to answer it here. All these years of strict diet control and maintaining a good A1C that you have done, have you managed to get out of your insulin resistance, or is it impossible to be 100% reversed of insulin resistance? In other words, do you still have any problems? Well, it's a good question, and it's a little bit more complicated than you might think. Now, I know full well I can't go back to the way I ate, and almost nobody can, and nobody should ever want to anyway. And I wouldn't want to. What I found out was the way I was eating was not just giving me diabetes, it was totally unhealthy for me. It was wrong. I was not being a good steward of my temple, as the Bible calls our body, calls it the temple of the Lord. I wasn't being a good steward of my body. So it's kind of a moot point if somebody says, well, can you stop being diabetic to the point where you can go back to a normal diet, a quote, normal diet? A normal diet is a horrible diet. I wouldn't want to go back. But let's get on to it. On the positive side, there are some signs that I am doing better now than I once did. I have done a couple of YouTube tests where I did eat some high-carb foods, similar to ones that I had back in the old days before I knew any better. And I got better numbers now than I did then. One example was, and I've told this before, how I was just starting to learn about doing post-meal tests, and I ate a big old hamburger with top and bottom bun, big buns on a big patty. And then I had a bunch of Fritos corn chips. And so early on in creating diabetes videos, I just wanted to revisit that meal and see how it did for me. And so I met with a couple of friends, and we all ate a Whopper, which was about the similar size hamburger as the one I ate previously. Now, the one I ate previously, I think I had like about a 185 or a 190 about an hour after finishing. And I knew that was too high, and it was depressing. And that was one of the things that really motivated me to start changing my diet. That plus the fact that the next meal I tested myself on was a Cobb salad or a garden salad, and it barely jumped up to 120. So I compared those two, and I thought, okay, I know I go this direction, I don't go that. Anyway, when I started YouTube, I decided I would replicate that meal and see what it did and kind of make a point. And so a couple of friends of mine, good friends, Fred and Linda Lindstrom, they joined me in that. And so we had a big old hamburger and Fritos corn chips, just like I had previously. And then we had an omelet at IHOP, and we tested our blood sugar. And sure enough, the hamburger and the corn chips raised it far higher than the omelet did. But the point I'm making here is when I tested myself the second time around, which was years and years later, first one would have been around 2002, I think. And then the second would have been around, I guess, around 2015, 2016, maybe 2017. I'm not sure, but just a few years ago. On the second time I ate the big hamburger and the chips, my number was lower. It was like 145. So I had a lower score after eating a very similar meal, something like 15 years later. So that's an evidence that I handle things a little bit better than I normally had before. Another area that shows me that I've made some progress against insulin resistance is I don't have much dawn effect. And I hear some terrible stories about dawn effect and people that will go to bed with a 95 milligrams per deciliter score, and they'll wake up with a 150. I don't ever get that. Mine will drift up a little bit, usually after I wake up. When I first wake up, it's usually almost as good as it was the night before. And then, so I don't have much dawn effect that way. And then when I fast and do a 24, 36-hour fast, Again, lots of people tell me, oh, it goes up like crazy, and I just don't understand it. It's frustrating. I'm not even putting any food in my body, and my glucose is going steadily up. Well, that's sort of an extension of the dawn effect, and that doesn't happen for me. I think, and I'm guessing because I don't know for sure, but I'm suspecting that I don't have a lot of pancreas fat or liver fat on me, as I probably did in those early days. So I think I have helped myself with insulin resistance, and I'm much better than I was. I've never taken an insulin test. You say, why not? I don't know. I just don't have a big motivation. I know everything's going pretty well and so forth. There is one thing, however, that makes it a little tricky when you're trying to determine, am I really doing better with insulin resistance? And that is the fact that when you eat something high carb, when you haven't been eating high carb for a long time, and you finally decide to eat something high carb just to test yourself, or maybe you go and get a glucose tolerance test, and you shoot way up. Some people say, well, aha, that just shows you're still as insulin resistant as ever. It may not. It may not. And here's why. Your body has a memory. It remembers the kind of meals you've been eating. And normally, if you've been eating high-fat, low-carb, and just not giving it many carbs, your body gets in the habit, the routine, of just not releasing much insulin. There's no need to. You didn't eat high carb a week ago. You didn't eat it last Tuesday. You didn't eat it today. Your body begins to just remember that every meal you're eating is low carb, so it automatically puts out small amounts of insulin. Well, that's fine and good, but if you suddenly do a change and you change it up, and instead of eating your low carb, high fat meal, you eat a big mound of rice and a big baked potato, and you have an apple pie with ice cream on it afterwards, and then you swallow it all down with a large Coca-Cola, your body is so in the habit of not releasing much insulin, it may remember all the previous meals and not give you much insulin at first, and you may shoot way up. So some people say if you're going to take a glucose tolerance test, what you need to do is you need to eat more carbs several days beforehand. You can change that. And by the way, I believe that's why there have been some people who just did a test and said, well, I'm going to test the low-carb, high-fat, and they go off their normal diet, which is a higher-carb diet. They do the low-carb diet, and after a while they report, well, I was becoming more insulin resistant. What they mean is, I've been doing low-carb for a while, and then I switched to a high-carb, or I did a glucose tolerance test, and my blood sugar shot way higher than it ever used to. Well, your body has gotten in the rhythm of eating low carb. So your body remembers that, and it doesn't put out much insulin, and therefore your blood sugar runs up pretty high when you do. So it's kind of hard to tell. Now, I could just go high carb for a couple of weeks, and then I'd find out really where I stand. I don't want to do that. I think that's just silly. I'm happy doing low carb, and I believe all is well. So I think, all in all, that I've made progress. But I don't fool myself. I don't kid myself into thinking, well, I'm so totally cured that I could eat anything now and no problem. I don't believe I can. And another thing to remember is that as you get older, you become less able to handle carbs, just like older people tend to be heavier. One of the things that's kind of funny is on YouTube, they've got these videos about how do they look now, and they'll show you some television show or some movie, and the actors, how they looked then, which was maybe 25, 30 years ago, and then they show what they look like now. And, of course, they don't look as good. Time has a way of affecting our looks, but more than that, most of them have gained significant weight. Why is it that many people, and women are especially this way, as teens, they're slim. As 40-year-olds, they're on the heavy side. As 60-year-olds, they're quite heavy. That's kind of the natural progression of things unless you make some dietary changes, which you certainly should and can. If you've recently been diagnosed with diabetes and you've just discovered this channel, let me recommend that you go to our Uploads page, which will give you access to every diabetic video we've posted since we began. As you work your way through all our videos, I believe you'll find the help you need. A link to our Uploads page is in the description.